Okay, so we've already called the meeting to order, so we just need to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our agenda is set, so we're on the presentations.
So at the request of the board, Mrs. Gaylor and Mrs. Rocco is going to give you some information on OA Elementary's the Science of Reading journey, just to provide you some information on where they have come and where they have been.
Is that better?
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is something that Connie and I are both very passionate about, and before we get started, I wanted to just clarify that the science of reading is not a curriculum that can be purchased. It's the science about learning how to read. So we have two important handouts that we wanted to share with you, and they're going to be discussed a little bit further on.
So some of this we're just going to recap quickly. The journey at Oakfield with the Science of Reading began in the fall of 2019 when I came on board. And I started looking at our reading scores. At that time we were about 47% proficiency for our grade 3 through 5. We started having conversations with staff. How do we teach reading? What resources do we use? What strategies are we using? And so that took us right into the winter of 2020, and I know at some point we've talked with you about this as well. We started having curriculum resource conversations with staff. It was totally voluntary. They talk about what they're using to teach, the things that they thought worked well, the things that they didn't think worked well, the ugly pieces of it. We had whole school learning with faculty meetings. We'd share out s'mores, giving everybody kind of the basics of the science of reading, talking about the 5 components of literacy, which is one of those handouts Lynn shared with you, talking about evidence-based practices. And at this point, it was just conversations. We were just making ourselves aware. We were learning together alongside with our staff. And then spring 2020, COVID hit, but that never stops us. So in the midst of COVID, we continued to talk, explore evidence-based practices. Staff would communicate with us even when they were home doing their remote instruction. There were texts back and forth, sharing podcasts with each other, sharing articles. So that conversation really of the teacher's own initiative kept going.
And at that point, we had talked with Jessica Kramer at GVET BOCES. She started to dive into a lot of the podcasts that we were listening, and we were talking back and forth amongst us. And she hosted a summer PD that really broke down the science of reading. They broke down the different components. There's a lot of buzzwords in education. There's a lot of pendulum switching. So sometimes you hear about a balanced literacy, a structured literacy. And so we really wanted to take away all of that buzzwords, look and see what do we need to do to give our children a foundation in reading. And that's where we come to the 5 components. One of the stair steps is what I call it. This is showing you the foundation of a child's learning path, starting from UPK all the way up. If at any point the student is struggling in one of those areas, you really have to have some intense instruction and an intervention to regroup that child. But at the same time, we also discovered that the vocabulary is also intertwined, and you can see that they are overlapping. They're overlapping because you shouldn't just be teaching in one isolated component. And unfortunately, some of the programs that we had purchased in the past, through no fault of anybody's, really didn't break that down appropriately. When you talk about Lucy Calkins, there's a lot of picture cueing where you're teaching kids to look at a picture when they're stuck in a word. And that's something that we're moving away from. We're also moving away from just talking about a student as a level. when you're a reader, you're not a level J, you know? I could say, Lorna, I'm a level J, and Lorna's gonna go, but what do I need to do to help you get better? And so that's what we have really worked on this year with our teachers, and breaking it down so that it's teachable moments, and it's all based on skills. And we've given them a path on how those skills need to be taught, in which order they need to be addressed, and when to go back and start over and provide some really intense interventions.
So that brings us to this fall, when we came back 5 days a week in person in those good old days. We began to implement everything that we had been talking about. So Foundations was fully implemented, every classroom pre-K through 2. Phonics for Reading was implemented in 3rd grade. Ready Reading was K through 5. Teachers started looking at their decodable text in a different way, and again, we're going away from the leveled readers and starting to use text that the kids could actually decode based on the sounds that they had been learning. A lot more phonemic awareness activities. We incorporated word ladders, a lot of morphology work. We incorporated supplemental intervention and or enrichment for our teachers. So if they had kids that were a little behind in class, they could give them more support. Or if they had kids that were really kind of ahead, they could give them some more challenging activities to do. Our literacy team, which is a teacher-driven, teacher-led team, chose to focus on the science of reading this year. That was all of their decision. We weren't part of that. We were very excited that they chose that, but that was strictly their decision. We were able to participate virtually in the New York State Reading League Conference. And what that is, it's a state-run reading league where their initiative is just educating schools about the science of reading, what are the best evidence-based practices, and helping schools learn. So that was a virtual conference. So by participating in it, we now have access to all the recordings and all their information, and that is something that we share with staff as well as the lit team uses when they have their meetings. And winter 2021, what are we headed for? Right now, GV BOCES, again with Jess Kramer, are doing a book study called Equipped for Reading Success, and we have 10 staff members that have enrolled in that. Our lit team is continuing their science of reading work. We're starting to plan for next steps. You know, budget season is coming up. We're thinking about what do we need. We know we need something a little bit more structured for our phonemic awareness. I mean, we don't have this all figured out yet. We're learning as we go. We know that we want to shift from word walls to sound walls. A lot of our teachers have taken word walls down already. So again, that's just another learning shift that we're making. And we know we want to expand our decodable text resources and help our teachers kind of rewrite some of the texts we already have to make them more appropriate for reading skills as our kids progress through. So a lot of it for right now in the winter is we're learning. And as we know better, we do better.
And at the beginning of the year, when we were talking about this with our teachers, we said, listen, COVID happened. We've had a lot on our plate. This is not something you need to do. Don't jump in. We're making small shifts. The one shift that we wanted to make was talking about kids in a skill group, whether that was in the classroom with a tier 1 or for our RTI model for tier 2 and tier 3. But my faculty, they are sponges and they want to know better and do better, and so they jumped in head first. Connie and I went back and forth about bringing our lit team here to have them do all the talking, and with all the circumstances, we did reach out to them. So the following slides are quotes directly from each representative that's on the lit team. We reached out to them in an email and explained what we were doing tonight and said, please share the good, the bad, and the ugly with the board so that this is their voice. So you can see we have a lot of Twitter stuff. Jess Kramer has been partnering with us. But this is from our pre-K friends. Did everybody have a chance to read that?
This was all should have been in the presentation that we shared with you earlier.
It's a little bit longer, but this is from our kindergarten representative. Was that good wait time? It's been a long time since I've had to practice wait time. Oh, that didn't work. That's a video.
Good evening. I was going to share with you a little bit of my science of reading journey and kind of how it's looking in my classroom. This summer I kind of started diving into the science of reading and learning with the LIT team. And these are just some of the ways that I'm implementing it into my classroom this year. The first slide here kind of shows decodable books and how we're using decodable books in my classroom. We're using them in our reading groups as well as on our Google Classroom. They're in one of their folders that they can access in school and out of school. And decodable books are books that are written with a focus on a particular phonetic pattern or word family. So the students are really enjoying these, and it really ties in nicely to our Foundations program, which we're going to see that on the next slide.
These are some of the difficulties our teachers actually deal with every single day. When it's thinking, it goes around and around and around.
Should I just take the rest?
Yeah, not streaming a video again.
We'll make sure we send this to you so you can finish watching the rest of that video. This is our 5th grade representative, and Ashley is our lit chair teacher, so she leads this team. And the letter that Connie just handed out to you is from our rating specialist. She wrote us an email, and it was quite lengthy, so we wanted to just get that to you in print. We also have a special ed teacher, Megan Williams. She's on the team. She's in 1st grade this year, and she has shown different examples of how she's applying her work with her learners as well. And then we're just going to leave you with this quote. So I don't know if you have questions for us. Like we said, this is quite the wormhole that we fall into, but we're excited about it. It's been really great shifts. They've been slight shifts, they've been little shifts. Some teachers have really hit it hard and they're ready to go and they're becoming experts. And others are a little bit slow and steady, and we're providing them the supports and the trainings throughout the literacy team meetings that they have about bi-monthly. And then we have a representative from each grade level, so when they do meet with grade level teams, there's additional time for practice and resources and sharing out how it's working. Any questions for us?
Just a couple quick ideas here. I think you've shifted from Words Their Way originally to now Foundations. Is that correct? Connie, before you came on board, that was the kind of the program that you were doing. Words Their Way, I felt like you assess kids, and then you said, well, you're a syllable jump, you're wherever you are, letter name, word, whatever. And for this, is it more based on the specific student, are all kindergartners getting the same foundation lesson at the same time? And then if there's a discrepancy perhaps and one needs more intense instruction, does their RTI tier 2 or tier 3 change? And if so, what are you using instead of foundations outside of the tier 1 intervention?
So for Foundations is going to be your tier 1. They do have some intervention components, so you can do some reteaching, pre-teaching, very much individualized. But we also have Boost, Blast, Countdown. Those are from Really Good Reading. Some of the slides you may have noticed, we have Haggerty on there. Am I missing anything? but Wiley Beldens is an author, and his focus has been really hitting the phonics side, but enhancing those decodables, because decodable books, sometimes the patterns don't make any sense, and you might have Tad the rat sat on a mat, and there's no comprehension there. So he's taking those texts and he's developing them to be a rich decodable, and he's including a lot of nonfiction, which has been a huge push for us to have that balance of nonfiction and fiction. So there's never going to be another big box program. Like, we're not going to say we're married to Lucy, we're not going to say we're married to a certain program. There's a lot of different components, because right now we're focusing on meeting the 5 components. And so all of the programs, all the resources, everything that's being used and implemented will fall on one of those stairs, as I like to call them.
And then what's the plan for assessment, Connie? Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to
That's okay.
interrupt. Go ahead, go ahead.
Well, one of the things I just wanted to mention, I don't know if Kendall uses Foundations or not.
Holly
but-
did. I've used it intermittently.
Yeah, 'cause Foundations is phonemic awareness, it's phonics, it's writing, it's spelling, I mean, it's handwriting physically also. So it's more than just decoding words, so there's multi-levels, and so we're gonna hit that hard pre-K through 3, those really foundational years. Like Lynn said, in class RTI, sometimes they're just doing more foundations, because we know some of our students, it's not that they can't get it, but they just need more repetition than their peers. And so they get that repetition. And those kids that even when you're doing more repetition, who they don't get it, then we have our RTI providers, and like Lynn mentioned, we have Boost, Blast, Blitz, which are all consistent with a scope and sequence of foundation, so they marry really well. And then we're hoping to be able to purchase Haggerty next year for the phonemic awareness for those kids who need that little boost, that they're not just getting enough for foundations for that.
So that's how we talk about the word work, then apply it to the writing towards the end. So I think sometimes there's been times where colleges will teach you and the teacher prep to teach things in isolation. There's a lot of the cueing and the picture cues that just don't make a lot of sense. Something that's happened as far as a shift with this research that we've learned is you do a lot of the word work, word building, and then you put that into a decodable, and then you read through the decodable, and then you apply it to the writing. And so you're seeing a cycle. So instead of having, Jake Gaylert just go to RTI group and he's working on CBC words, and he comes back to the classroom and he's working on something else. Our process right now, whether they're in RTI or they're in the homeroom, is to have that cycle. So they're connected with, we're going to start with some word work and some sounds and some blending. Then we're going to move that same pattern, and you're going to see it in your reading, and you're going to work with it in your reading, and then you're also going to apply it to the writing. And so there's a lot of connection that's happening now that wasn't happening before in some of those purchase programs that we've used in the past.
So then down, like the beginning of the year, did you guys start with an assessment, like an initial assessment for?
Yep, so this year we had the iReady, so we used iReady Diagnostic, but then our specialists, we charged them with finding some other starting data points. So we used iReady Diagnostics, we had foundation screeners, we had oral fluency screeners. So our beginning of the year data, we used multiple data points, which was new for us this year. And all of the teachers this year, we mentioned it in here, we kind of glossed over a little bit, but all of our RTI groups, both in class and kids that get pulled, are skill-based groups. And so there's growth monitoring using the iReady, but then there's also progress monitoring. So a group might be working on phonemic awareness, so you've got your skill group, and then you have goals. Their goal might be, they'll be able to produce 44 out of 44 phonemic sounds given the grapheme. And then they're going to tell us the intervention, what intervention are you using? Okay, they're using countdown. Okay, and then what's your progress monitoring? If they're the tier 2, every 2 weeks we're going to see how many out of 44 do they have. If they're tier 3, every week we're going to see. So those are the extra layers that we've added this year to try to really focus on, instead of that broad, like LLI program, well, let's just hit them with everything. Well, instead, let's look at these kids and what does Matt need? What does John need? What does Lorna need? And sometimes our kids need different skill help. And so that goes back to not being able to just say, well, you're a level L. Well, that doesn't help me. What do you need work with? What do you need help on? So that's kind of a shift that we've made this year. It's a progress. It's a work in progress. As we go, we have our big RTI meeting on Thursday, which we have to conduct virtually, which is going to be very interesting, where literally we look at all the kids who've been taking it at RTI. I have a whole spreadsheet of kids that have been referred. to either move groups, or teachers are saying, you know what, I've done all this monitoring and I really think this kid just needs a little bit of extra help. And we're gonna go through and just pound out this process and try to figure out how to place these kids based on these skill groups. So that's our plan of attack for this year. Again, it's a work in progress. Teachers have mentioned to us already that they see such a difference in the growth with their kids, with their reading. Our OT specialist has mentioned like the handwriting in these kids has improved. I mean, there's a lot of just little things that we didn't anticipate that are coming back as positives based on some of these shifts we're starting to make.
Crazy question, Connie. If you were to look at this in aggregate, like you look at the data in aggregate, do you think over time you'd be able to pull trends out that we could then generate possibly into like perhaps elementary goal that we could kind of assess from the beginning to the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what kind of data you're looking at. Like when we look at the state data,
I think it's a valid place to look. I mean, it's good to compare ourselves to component school districts and to see where we're at in comparison. And that's just one point, but I think, you know, we'd like to see progress moving forward. This would be a great way to set some goals that we all share.
Yep. And, you know, that's actually something I've thought about. I would like us to have a literacy plan, like a more cohesive literacy plan across the district.
I agree.
And we're starting in elementary school because they're ripe and they're in the midst of it. And like Lynn said, we try to pull back because like these things that they, well, you know, Justin, you're in the classroom, you know how crazy it is for teachers right now. But the majority of them either said, okay, I only can do a baby step, or I'm going to go full in. People aren't saying, no, we don't want to do it because they see the results. So I would want to kind of get through this piece first, because I'm not sure our data we're collecting this year, hopefully we're going to see growth, and actually we already have seen growth, but I'm not sure how valid that is in a un-COVID year. No. But I agree, I would like to put something together, and then my hope is we're kind of revamping how we do the whole MTSS referral process, everything. My hope is once we get some of the glitches worked out, I'm going to take this process up to the middle high school. It'll look a little bit different because you have to meet the needs of that age learner, but bring some of those elements that we're discovering and really work at the elementary school. So that was a long way of saying, yes, we want to get there, but I think we need to get through this COVID stuff first. But I'm excited to look at our data at the end of this year, just based on our progress monitoring, our growth monitoring, and see what's happened with our kiddos.
I'd be curious to see the percentage of kids that were on grade level.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. Like we get charged up about this stuff. Our teachers are getting charged up about this stuff. I know you come from this background, and so this whole, even the curriculum in the ELA, like that charges you up too. So we hope to bring you some great results at the end of the year.
Great.
That was going to be my question, coming from a middle high school perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When kids can't read,
it
really hinders everything they do, and it's something they hide, and it's something they can't access the math, they can't.
Yep, absolutely.
They can't produce the math.
Yep.
Poor handwriting means they can't follow a complicated problem. So when it gets beyond what they can do in their head, they can't do it on paper.
Yep, so what we've done this year is...
My question is, what are you doing for all the kids, and maybe it's yours and maybe the secondary ed, what is your plan for doing? What can you do to catch up those kids that are secondary
Absolutely.
Aren't good readers, because we have a huge history of that?
Yep, great question. So that's work that we've already started. So we have a reading teacher, Gretchen Nowak, and she has kind of come on the science of reading journey with us. So I share all the resources that are like the 3 through 6 that are geared toward elementary. They actually are very applicable up here, so she uses them. We also this year were able to utilize one of our teaching assistants, and unfortunately because of COVID, we had her signed up to do quite a few reading classes for grade 9 because we're realizing that these kids still need this extra support. Matt and JC did some really, really creative scheduling, and although she doesn't have as many reading classes as we had originally hoped, she still has 2 classes of 9th grade kids that are getting that extra reading support, and I'm sharing the same resources with her. So I'm in continual conversation with the 2 of them, what's working, what's not, what they want to try. Because exactly what you're saying, we see that there's this gap. we were know better, do better, starting with the littles, but what do we do with this other population? So we are starting to have those conversations. I'm starting to budget in resources for them moving forward so they can best support our middle and high school kids as they journey on this path too. Because that's a valid concern.
That's something I would really like to see you do, if at all possible, at that level, because
Yep.
those are the ones, it hinders everything they do if they can't read.
Yep, ask Matt, I
hurts them.
fight for him all the time.
What we see traditionally as they go on into the high school is reading isn't a program, it's something that should be taught in the content areas by our content area teachers within the daily lessons. More and more Regents exams are becoming literacy exams, so what we need to do is do a better job of teaching our kids how to read in our content area, and that'll be a push as we move into the future.
You know, I guess I have to take issue with that somewhat. As somebody who's highly verbal,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
prove it all the time.
I know. So that was something I could do in math, that's something I stressed. But I don't, when you have kids at the secondary level who are 4 and 5, even 6th grade levels below in their reading level, you can't teach that in the content area. There has to be supplementation,
Yep.
or they'll never recover.
And
So
that's why our
while-
special ed teachers, our reading teachers, we
Well, every-
pull kids.
Every math teacher that I know in the building does already do that, keywords, all that. But I just want to make sure that in this COVID time with the bad budgets, that there's really support in the secondary level to catch those kids who are way past the early intervention, which I'm
Yep.
thrilled about. And I hope that 47%
Yeah,
on the grade level.
and I'm very aware of it, and as is our Matt and JC and Danelle and Lynn, and we know that that's a group we're working with. Again, I've been working with Gretchen. We brought Lisa on board. We hope to even expand that further. Even in some of the curriculum work that we did last year, one of the things that at the middle high level I had them do is they now have common vocabulary lists for math from 7th grade, right, or 6th grade now, right through 12th. And so they have this common vocabulary list, so we can start teaching kids this common vocabulary that's specific to their content area to help them understand more. Because we know that vocab and knowledge building is crucial to that fluent reading. They have to have some
Right.
of that knowledge. So we've done that across all the subject areas. So 6 through 12, every subject area has a common vocabulary list that they pull from, so they're using the same language with kids when they're talking about the same terms.
I think that's a great start.
Yep.
And
There's a long way to go.
And in addition, I don't mean to be contrary, Matt, but everybody's not a reading teacher. So it's good to have good explanations, good reinforcement in the content areas. But I want to make sure as a district, we support those poor lost secondary kids who can't read.
And that's something that we're focusing on as well in our journey, even for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers and our special ed teachers. You know, it's the way that some of the higher ed has taught teachers how to teach reading. And when you look through some of these studies and you listen to some of these podcasts, I have a teacher in my building right now that she's finishing up her master's in literacy, and she came in to Connie and I and said, I'm so disheartened that they don't talk about this. They don't want to talk about this because it goes against what they have always believed. But all of this makes so much more sense. So we took that with us, and you know, we are talking to our science teachers. We are talking with our social studies and math teachers about, you know, if you have somebody that's in a writing group, or you know, you have a word problem. Kristen Laker has been participating in conversations with us when she's leading my math team. You know, we're sharing that information with everybody so that we are giving everybody an even playing field for, you know, support. And one of the reasons that we put it in the newsletter is to try and enhance the community's knowledge and let them understand and give them tips and tricks so that we can move away from, well, look at the picture, to what's the picture tell you? You know, and really hit those sounds and teach our parents how to use the sounds. Working with our speech pathologist and sound walls and all of that stuff will continue to evolve. But we do have some nice resources that we've found are very helpful for 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Knowing that Foundations does stop at 3rd grade, but we do have kids that are leaving me that have missed some of this foundational work. And so we are supplementing with our teachers so that they're teaching the standards that they need to teach, but we also are giving them the resources to try and fill those gaps now so that it doesn't become an ending, you know, struggle for them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We could talk about this all night.
Last year, Lynn, you had some volunteers that were coming in to help read with the kids.
Yeah.
So this year you haven't been able to.
Yeah.
That's something we should maybe kind of consider trying to allow some of them to come back to help with the reading? Or?
So I would definitely love to be able to open up our building and encourage that. But before we did that, I really do want to do some more work with them. We did some workshops with them last year before they came in, but knowing more about the science of reading path and really focusing on the 5 components, I want to go through some of these workshop models with them. I want them to do a couple podcast trainings with us first, so that we really can make sure that they are well versed in our language and our shifts, and then they'll be able to enhance the support that they're offering the teachers.
Just, I guess, not an opinion, maybe try to get that even in COVID world that we live in.
Yeah.
Start going down that path to start getting those volunteers.
And Connie and I have enough information, and we can always, pull in Jess Kramer, that we can do like a virtual class and kind of share information that way as well. So that's something that we can easily, kind of brainstorm with us and pull Jess in. I know that she's an active member of our community, which has been really nice to have her in on our side as well. So I think the 3 of us could really put something together for our community to understand this as well.
I second that idea.
All right. We'll get that organized. Anything else?
Thank you. I know you had to put that together fast for us. Really appreciate getting an update on that.
Thank you for listening. Very excited about this process.
Thank you, Lynn.
Good job.
Okay, on to approval of minutes. Be it resolved, the minutes of the November 17th meeting be approved. Can we get a motion?
So,
A second?
second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. No, if we've got any visitors' requests, is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Approval of warrants be resolved after an audit of bills, payment of the November 12th, November 30th, and December 10th warrants and internal claims audit reports be approved. Get a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Treasurer's report, be resolved that the treasurer's report for October 2020 be approved. Have a motion? Second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes. Third reading of the remote learning proposed
Yes,
policy.
so late this afternoon, I made the suggestion based on last month's kind of question regarding the remote learning policy. There was some words in there that I think, honestly, after talking with administration and kind of collaborating with the OATA, this remote learning policy, and to Lorna's question last month about the independent study, we actually don't think that the word independent study even falls underneath this policy. Remote learning is something completely separate. Currently, obviously, what we're doing right now. So what I suggest is that the board, obviously with this third reading, we just kind of edited that first sentence and removed the independent study word out of there. So it is just strictly about remote learning. And then currently we are working on a new policy for independent study with a regulation that I will not present to the board just because I don't want a third reading of one policy and a first reading of the other and get into that. So I ask that the board, if you're okay with just the wording and removing that this policy be approved tonight, but again, you still have a third and final reading. And then throughout the course of the year, I'll work with the OATA and more so the high school administration on a new policy and a regulation, which I already have given to them. We've already made some good headway with that I can present to you at a later board meeting. So currently right now, the remote learning, it just says in the event of a pandemic or extraordinary circumstances, The district may offer remote or distance learning classes to students based on their scheduled course load for their grade level. So we completely removed out any sort of indication of independent studies.
I think that sounds better.
And the rest stays the same, right?
The
John?
rest stays the same, and then again, we're doing some research on what independent study is, and of course, as we got into that, what does it look like? There should be some guidelines, some restrictions, and some other things that we need to do a little more research on. So we're just reviewing other schools' policies. I did contact everyone BOCES to see if they had one on independent study. We do have a policy on independent study from 2006, and it's a sentence long and doesn't really say anything. So I think it's time for us to update, the independent study. But I can present that to you next board meeting if so desired. That's all I had for that policy.
I think that was a big improvement. Simple and clarified.
Yeah, the lead. I like it. All right.
Be it resolved that policy 7150 remote learning be adopted as written. Can we get a motion?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Other reports? See?
Really nothing, not a whole lot has changed as far as the proposed 20% aid withholding. We've been getting our payments at 100% for the 2021 school year. So we're hoping maybe after the end of the December, maybe first part of the January, we'll find out what's going to happen with that, if stimulus money gets passed, and what the governor's going to come out with the 21-22 budget, because I think that's where we're going to see.
Could you speak up a little, please? Could you speak up a little?
I'm sorry, I can take this off. So basically, thinking that it's probably, we're not going to hear anything about the 20% aid withholding until after the first of the year. The transportation aid cuts, there's still conversations around that. We've been providing advocacy, information, dollar figures to hopefully mitigate that. If that is to come about, I don't think that they're going to do what they initially said that they were going to do. John and I have been looking at the revenue and expenses to see where we're coming out. We've put a freeze on the budget so that we aren't spending unnecessary. We've had a few POs go through that are necessary, but we're trying to really keep the expenses locked down for the rest of the year, anticipating that next year's budget's going to be, kind of tight. We are having meetings with our admin over break to talk about next year's budget, get that started. It's been a little challenging not knowing the software as well as I would like to yet know that. We do have some training tomorrow. We're going to focus on getting that in place. It does have budgeting functionality. I'm just not familiar with it at all. So hoping to get some knowledge on that. Does anybody have any questions about?
So it could be 20%, 12%. I thought I heard 12% thrown out there.
Yeah, we don't know. And it's probably going to impact 2021 or 21-22 budget, probably more. They haven't withheld any of the state aid for this year, but the bulk of our state aid comes in the spring, so we'll see.
When you say this year, you mean this calendar year?
This calendar year, so the aid, the money, the cash flow that's coming through this year has not come through. They did withhold 20% of and it's a very small amount, the very end of the year payments that, and it's not a lot of money for last year, but this year's aid has not been cut at all to this point.
And when you said a few sentences ago, I think it was in regards to the transportation aid, they're not going to do what they said they were. What were you referring to?
So, what?
I can elaborate on that. So the transportation aid, obviously, with the fiscal year and what we had last spring from March 16th through the end of June, we get transportation aid on a fiscal year. Currently, the way the law is written is that transportation aid is given to school districts for the sole purpose of providing transportation of students to and from school.
Right.
Because the state cannot violate any such law, their response was, you will not receive transportation aid from March till June. For some districts, including ours, you're possibly looking at a $300,000 to $400,000 loss, coupled with the fact that we still had to deliver meals, we still had to deliver supplies and materials to students, and it's, while the law is there, obviously it was written without ever thinking that something like this was ever going to happen. So right now, there is a huge push for that law to change. There's huge advocacy for it. I've signed off letters. I had a meeting with Steve Hawley this morning. It's out there that we need that aid. There's a huge push from NISBA, from NISCUS. We think it's going to happen. It's just common sense that because we were forced to do what we needed to do, and we rely on that money, that it should come to us. When? I have no idea, and that's the kicker. So as we look at budgeting, currently right now, like I said, it's a $300,000 to $400,000 loss for us for those 4 months, and that's something that small rural districts can't handle. And so we're pushing for that, but again, it's all the timing. We may see that a year and a half down the road. We could see it in 4 months, and that's the stuff that keeps us up at night.
So basically, nothing's changed on that issue.
Correct. There's a law out there to change the wording and to provide us that aid.
When I heard that they're not going to do what they said they were going to do, I wanted to know, should I be hopeful or dismayed? So I'm still dismayed.
I'm hopeful because it is the right thing to do, and it's the smart thing to do, and again, sometimes it's just common sense, but that's again stuff that we struggle with when we try to put a budget together and think about the revenues and the aid that we're supposed to get.
There must be enough cash flow, so you're anticipating this $300,000 or $400,000. I don't know when you anticipated that we would receive that, but there must be enough cash flow that the fact that we didn't get that, we're not cash deficit, and we're still able to pay bills and keep the lights on and pay the heating bill.
Yes.
And we'll stay that way, hopefully, through the rest of the school
Yes,
year.
Jordan has turned down the temperature now that the kids aren't here. No, I'm joking. We're okay. We're looking at the revenue and the expenditure side of the budgets. We actually looked at it today. We're right on par. But knowing some of these things, that's why there is a budget freeze. We're not spending things on stuff that we hope that we could have. It is more of emergency spending. And again, we're anticipating coming back on January 11th. But you throw in there the delay of winter sports. And so all of a sudden now, do we have additional cash flow because we're not paying coaching stipends and officials and things like that? So it all just kind of offsets, and every day it shifts like a pendulum. So, but we're okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Christine before we move on? Okay, thank you. John?
Sure. Just a few great announcements. First of all, I want to congratulate Stephanie Clark. She was a winner of the Staples Thank a Teacher contest. She was nominated by a colleague and ended up winning one of 20 grand prizes across the country. So you'll see later on in the board agenda that you will be hopefully accepting a $5,000 donation of gift cards to Stephanie for her use in her classroom to supply, to buy supplies and materials. So congratulations to Stephanie, and thank you to her colleague. Does she know who the colleague was?
Yeah, Mary Kalinowski nominated her.
I don't know if that was still a secret.
No, it's not anymore. And to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, Stephanie and I have had some conversations, and she does not want to spend money on anything for her needs, and she is working with Tammy Cassidy, and she wants to enhance the STEM room. So everything she wants to spend and buy will all go to the STEM lab so that students UPK 5 can benefit from that money.
Yeah. Absolutely well deserved. She's a fantastic teacher, so congratulations, Stephanie. Want to congratulate our girls and boys cross country teams. They had an awesome year, as you know, that we hosted sectionals here. The girls finished 3rd out of 14 teams, and the boys finished 2nd out of 13 teams. And Zach Hall was the Section 5 Class D1 cross country champion here on his home turf. He said he wanted to protect it with a time of 16:50. Amazing. So congratulations to the cross country teams, to Pete Bueller, and certainly Zach Hall. And the last thing that I want to mention, without getting a little teary-eyed, is unfortunately at the end of last week, the administration made the decision based on what we were dealing with last week that we had to go fully remote. Before I provide you a little bit of update on some data that we have and some updates on guidance, I want to thank the admin team. If the board doesn't know, they have spent their last 2 Saturdays and Sundays here. I mentioned to you about this contact tracing. This is something that is solely put on them, given the fact that we have the data and we have the information. And I don't think they've slept the last 2 weeks, and last week was very rough. And I just want to thank them for all their work, because you didn't sign up for this job to be a contact tracer. I know that. And I just want to thank you for your help and your leadership, because these decisions are never easy. But I think we have a fantastic team, and I do believe we made the absolute right decision in closing until January 8th. I also want to thank the teachers. We have told them since day one that there quite possibly could be a day where within 24 hours we might have to go hybrid or completely remote. And unfortunately it was this week. They have been absolute rock stars. We've given them the expectations of continuing on with teaching our kids, except for the little Google hookup that was countrywide come Monday morning. They have been absolute rock stars, and I don't think our kids are going to miss a beat for hopefully what is 12 days of remote learning, and then we can get back here full time. So I need to thank the teachers. I need to thank the cafeteria staff, the bus drivers, buildings and grounds, the other support staff. They are all working. We're delivering meals. The cafeteria staff delivered those and made those available today. Pickup is Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10:30 to 1. Our bus drivers are still working. They're delivering supplies, materials, lunches. Our buildings and grounds guy, they have now been working overtime. After last Thursday or Friday, again, they hosed down this place with a Clorox fire hose. And they've been working every single night too, because we do have staff reporting every day, and we are ensuring our staff is safe and secure and healthy being here. So they've been put on overload. And everybody has stepped up their game, from the teacher aides, the teaching assistants, to the everybody is all on board. So I think our transition was very seamless into this week. And like I said, knock on wood that we can come back in January. What I want to do is just provide the board a quick update on some of the data that we have, and also, go figure, guidance has changed since the last time I spoke to you. So if I could just keep you and the community apprised of where we are and what our situation is. Clicker works. So currently, as of about an hour ago, because Mr. Peterson just told me that we had 2 more positive cases this afternoon, these are our numbers. Then you wonder why we have to close down. So at the elementary school, we've had 3 positive students. At the middle high school, we've had 12. And notice with each and every one of the positive case, we have to do contact tracing. Each case probably takes a good 2 to 3 hours if we do our due diligence to figure out who's in constant contact, who's not, where people are, checking attendance records. It's a whole procedure that, you know, we do take pride in, because number 1, we want our staff and students to be safe, but number 2, we also want to make sure we get it right. We've had 2 positive teachers and staff at the elementary and 4 up here at the middle high school. What really stands out is, given the number of positive cases, the number of people then that are forced to quarantine. So we've had 73 students at the elementary have to quarantine. We actually had a section of kindergarten and a section of 2nd grade. And here at the middle high school, yeah, a tornado ripped through here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday last week, and we have over 250 kids currently right now that are quarantined from the middle high school. And when you know from grades 6 through 12 that you have about 400 and some, you're looking at well over 50% of our kids are quarantined. And then obviously we have to quarantine our staff, so we have 5 at the elementary and 24 at the middle high school. One of the things that we have to take into account is when you are missing 24 staff out of a building, you just don't have the subs to cover, and there's not much that you can really say or do with that. So obviously when the cases increase, we're forced, unfortunately, to close. Are there any questions on those numbers? I just figured I'd give the community and the board an update.
John, if a kid is exposed, how long of a time period? So if there's a student with a positive COVID, and they're in contact with another child or a student or whatever, how long of a time period?
So right now, the Department of Health is saying that anybody that has been in contact for 60 total minutes in a day. So I'll give you an example. We come to find out that a student has tested positive. Normally what that means is that kid's probably been home for a day or 2 because they've been symptomatic. That's why they go and get tested. So what the Department of Health is asking us to do is go back 2 days of that child having symptoms. So we have to really trace 2 days. So what we'll do with the teacher, what we'll do with the student is we will print out their schedule. We'll print out the teacher and the kids in each of those classes, and then we have to sit there and connect the dots of, is anybody exposed to this child over 60 minutes? And obviously it happens. I will refer to Mr. Peterson, who is a now expert in contact tracing, to either confirm that if you want to add anything, but it's quite the project and quite the I don't even know what you want to call it.
When we first started, the
procedure.
first case we had was one single kid. We print out all the schedules, we cross-checked them. We really decided which students were exposed to the students in 2 periods, because we only have 40-minute periods. And we quarantined a bunch of them. The most recent round of positive tests, we had multiple kids on the same day. So what we had to do is then go look and see which kids you could have been exposed to student A once, and then student B later in the day, and that necessitated another round of quarantines. So it was quite an elaborate process just to layer those. And then the guidance that we're getting from the Genesee County Health Department is spaces like the one we're in now, you don't have to contact trace it, which is when we first started the process, we were doing that. So the larger spaces like the library, this space, we don't contact trace it, just the classroom.
So it's pretty amazing when you look at these numbers though, Mr. Peterson, when you see 12 result in 261 cases.
Yeah.
It just is, it's jaw-dropping to me that just, I mean, almost.
We've had cases where we've had a positive student and we've had to quarantine over 50 kids. Just based on where they are, what they're doing, as far as teachers go as well. I could be a student and positive and be in a teacher's class first period and then maybe have them ninth period for office hours. Boom, that teacher's now quarantined.
So the message here is if your child is not feeling well, do not send them to school.
Correct.
That's the message that the community's got to get out of this.
Correct.
This isn't a joke. And it's even more, I think it's in the elementary where they're self-contained all day virtually. That's a whole classroom that's just done.
I had to shut down 5 classrooms in total from UPK all the way up to 5th grade as a result of some of the contact tracing and some of the positives.
A week ago today, we were running completely normal. It was full 5 days a week, in-person learning, and 7 days later, here we are, we're just been paralyzed by it.
But everything was great until it wasn't. And that's a very simple thing to say, but sucks.
But I will also tell you to the board of when we got hit last Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we were exactly 2 weeks out from Thanksgiving. And the governor had warned us. And so now if you take a look, we're going to be, you know, that's why we're taking that first week off. We're going to be 2 weeks out from Christmas. And so we're really going to have to monitor, number one, getting our staff healthy and back in the buildings. And then number two, can we bring the kids back? You know, that's a plan that we're going to have to stress. Number one, I can't staff the buildings if my staff isn't healthy. You know, we can still have our buildings open if we have a handful of students quarantined. And I'm not saying that they're, you know, that isn't an issue. But bottom line is I need the staff healthy to be here to educate these children. And when you start affecting the staff, that's where the issue comes in. So it's going to be dicey over the next month or so to see what, you know, the Christmas holiday break and even New Year's, what that brings.
But it's on our community right now.
It's on everybody's community.
It really is.
Sure.
It's up to us. If we want to move forward, people have to make some decisions.
Right. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that every case is different. Every positive case, depending on when it is, how far we have to trace back, where that person was. I know there's some questions out there of, but I was exposed to the same person, or I'm surprised I'm not quarantined, or why am I quarantined and I shouldn't be? Trust me, I will tell you that the administration is following, and we are following exactly what the Department of Health wants. It's confusing. It's it's a lengthy process. There's a lot that goes into it. So I can tell you, I'm on the front lines with you, and you're keeping me informed of what it is. And when we get these cases, I'm sure you're sick of the Parent Square notifications. These letters are going out. We're trying to keep up. But every situation sometimes is different. We've had actually a couple students test positive, but they're completely remote. So we don't have to do any contact tracing. And then there's some other issues where we do have some staff or students that test positive, but we don't have to contact trace because for the 3 days of when they were symptomatic, they weren't even here on campus. So a lot of it does go into when and who and how we contact trace. And I can tell you the admin team is right on top of it, absolutely.
We've also gotten negative results from students whose parents thought it was off. The student was exhibiting symptoms, waited a few days, took them back in, and then got a positive result. And I just had my phone buzzed and I got another one. So that's how fast this moves.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a feeling, John, on how many of the kids did come to school knowing that they had symptoms, or
Here's the issue. I told the board that I don't believe we were spreading this through the school. It wasn't teacher to student, student to student, student to teacher. We were actually getting a lot of phone calls from families saying that my spouse tested positive, now we got to get your kid out of the district or out of the building. So we did. And then of course, while that child is at home and within the family, all of a sudden 2 or 3 days later, they get symptoms, they go and get tested, and then now all of a sudden they're positive. So that's kind of how it started. The issue comes in is that when these cases started to happen, and Genesee now has this free rapid testing, a lot of these kids, for the most part, were asymptomatic. Or a lot of these parents were like, hey, I got a letter that someone was here, you're going on quarantine, I'm going to take you for testing tomorrow. And now we're getting some of these phone calls where the kids are on quarantine, and the parent goes, yeah, I took my kid on Friday because of everything was going on, and we got a whole bunch of phone calls yesterday and today saying my kid is now positive. So then we have to go back. So I'll tell you, there's no rhyme or reason to it. We do have a couple staff members that are very ill, and I very much wish them well. And then there's other kids that are positive that have absolutely no symptoms at all. It's very, very scary, very scary. You know, again, there's no rhyme or reason to it. You can't trace it back. You know, the incubation period is 10 to 14 days. So, you know, while you sit here and say, well, so-and-so may have got it from so-and-so because they were here, there's just no way of knowing. You could have caught it at Walmart over the weekend, or Tops or Wegmans on Thursday night when you went grocery shopping. It's just hard to tell.
I have a clarifying question to ask you guys. So our health department no longer considers the cafeteria a place for contact tracing? Correct. So when this is full of 50 desks,
Yes.
and somebody spends lunch in a study hall in here?
So it's not about, I'm right there with you, Lorna. The guidance changes every day. I will tell you that I was originally told that it was 60 minutes of continuous contact. So I was very happy to hear that because our classes are only 40 minutes long for the most part. Around Thanksgiving, I was told that it was different, that it was 60 minutes in total. So just as much as the CDC has come out that says the quarantine period is 7 days if you get a negative test or 10 days if you just stay at home, New York State is not following that, and they're not advising the local departments of health to go by that guidance, so we're still at 14 days. We're also one of the only entities in New York State that doesn't allow me or a school to have essential employees. So one of the things of why we're closed is we got 24 teachers out. Well, we only have 4 that are technically positive. That means I could bring 20 of them back if they're asymptomatic and have this building open. And there's some area school districts that are facing the same thing. So the recent guidance was from the contact tracing is that you don't need for us to do the cafeteria, the auditorium, the library, or the gymnasium because of the sheer volume of the room and that you're not in a classroom. Now, I could still be 6 feet from Matt here, but just because of the airflow and just the sheer volume of the room that you're in, we do not need to contact trace in those areas.
I just want to say that staggers me because I've seen this room with all those chairs in it and all those people, and one lunch period goes out and the other one is immediately coming in, and this is no critical attack on anyone, but there's no way that that's cleaned in between those groups, and everybody's got their mask off, and yet that's not considered a place to transmit it?
Lorna, I have no answer for you.
Okay, I like I said, I just had to get my head around that.
On a couple of the notifications, you could see that the person that tested positive had been in school that day.
Correct.
You know, so it was like December 10th. You
Correct.
sent us a notification, and the last time that person was in school was on December 10th. So it definitely raises an eyebrow when you see that. Now, I hear you about the county testing centers. I was there myself today and tested negative. I had tested because we left for Ohio. So I could see if somebody leaves school and says, I just want to, for the heck of it, hit the county center. But if you've got a pending test from 5 days previous because a parent went, well, because for whatever reason, should we be advising people not to come to school?
They are. So the test that you have to wait days for your results, absolutely. The nurses are telling the teachers or the students and those families, do not send your child until you have a test. Yes, absolutely. What's happening is, because of what we were experiencing last week, yes, they were leaving school, going to the rapid test, finding out their results in 15 or 20 minutes, and a lot of kids were positive. They weren't symptomatic. They were just going, and then all of a sudden, the parents call and say, it's a shocker, my kid is positive. But yes, if we send someone home or a parent calls and says, I'm going to get tested because my child, I want my child to be tested, we are absolutely telling them to stay home until they get the results, absolutely.
Have staff that are waiting on a test? Okay, Matt, I'm going to use you as Matt goes and gets a test and he has to wait 4 days because he does have symptoms and he has to wait 4 or 5 days for the results. Should he keep his daughters home from school?
We cannot do anything until we have those test results.
I didn't say,
So-
should you require him to?
Right.
I asked, should Matt keep his daughters home while he waits for the results of his test?
The answer for us is no, because there's no results to go by, there's no contact tracing. We can't, and the Department of Health says we can't make any determination. Now, yes, common sense is stay at home, but here's the other thing. If he's symptomatic and the children are asymptomatic, get them out of the house, send them to school. So there's a line there, because this could have a domino effect that all of us shouldn't be here tonight because somebody 3 days ago was. So there's that healthy decision that needs to be made, because you really can't make a decision until you have that test back. Especially if the kids are asymptomatic and they're not showing any signs, yes, then they are allowed to come to school.
Most of the kids are asymptomatic though, correct?
Pretty much. So if I could just share with you some quick guidance on the metrics the governor is now using. Obviously you've seen a huge spike in our positivity rates. Many of you may be questioning, how in the world are we not designated as a yellow zone? We could have been designated the yellow zone a couple of weeks ago. We are at about a 9% positivity rate. The governor did decide to kind of change his metrics, so it's not so much based on the positivity rates, but now he's looking at the capacity of hospitals to serve patients, more so the availability of hospital beds and the ICUs. There was a question that came across Parent Square today due to the fact that Batavia, as of yesterday, was designated in the yellow zone. That is the town and city of Batavia. We do have a few residents that have a Batavia address. We are not in a designated zone. It is where the school district lies. So I do know that there's some school districts out there that may have one building in a zone and another one isn't. It's exactly where the district lies. So obviously we're on one campus, so we go by this address. So even if a resident might happen to be in that yellow zone, as far as the community goes, they're in that yellow zone, but not as far as the school district. So red zones and orange zones. This is actually good news for school districts. Currently, right now, a red zone will be implemented in a region where the hospital capacity is within 21 days of reaching 90%. Obviously, the governor in some areas, like in Erie County, has stopped the elective procedures, and then he asked the hospitals to increase their bed capacity 50%. But if we are on an upswing where they decide that within 21 days we're going to be at 90% hospital capacity, they will indicate you in a red zone. In an orange zone, this is where 4% positivity rate over that 7-day average, over the last 10 days, that's that rolling average, is located. They will locate you in an orange zone. And again, if all of a sudden, day to day, week to week, there's a huge increase in your hospital admissions, they will indicate you in an orange zone. And for a yellow zone, this is where we have a 3% positivity rate over that, for 7 days, over that 10-day rolling average. And our area is in a top 10% in the state for hospital admissions per capita over the past week. And again, week over week that we see a growth in daily admissions. So some of this designation and requirements have changed. If we are designated in a yellow zone, we are required to test 20% of our student and employee population over a 2-week period, so we can remain open. Obviously then, after those 2 weeks, if we test 200 of our students and staff, if our numbers are below the region's 7-day rolling average in this yellow zone, we may stop testing and remain open. Just a reminder that we do need consent from parents to test anyone over 18 years of age. We had sent that out a few weeks ago. I have received a whole bunch of those back, not only from our students, but also from our staff. Currently, right now, if we are designated in a yellow zone, we already have a list of 200 staff members and students that we will test, so we can get by with the first round of testing. So we're not going to force testing of any students or any employees who refuse or who did not send in the consent form, at least not yet. We obviously can continue to attend school and work for the time being when we're in. A lot of parents had asked if they don't sign it, is their kid fully remote? Absolutely not. They can still attend school full time. And again, I think that we will have enough who will comply that already have, that we can remain fully open as long as we are under that 7-day rolling average. Again, the COVID-19 testing, it's that rapid antigen COVID test. It's the lower nasal swab with the Q-tip. It's 4 to 5 seconds in each nostril. We get the results in approximately 15 minutes. All tests will be administered by our nurses. We are looking at approximately, if we are designated in the yellow zone, 200 people over the 2-week span of those 10 days. We're looking at about 20 students and staff per day. So we're looking at 10 within each building, which is certainly doable. We have already received our limited service laboratory registration. That came a few weeks ago. And those rapid tests will be distributed to us by our local health department, who have them in stock. They'll be here within 24 hours if we ever get designated a zone. Again, we already have a list of staff and students that were sent to the nurses for testing. We will be testing all staff that has consented, and we are going to begin with students in grades 4 and 5 at the elementary, and then 11 and 12 here first at the middle high school. There is not a need to test at this point the real young littles. In my mind, that's just not appropriate at this time. The one concern that I do have is if we are still remote and we get designated an area, there's a couple options. If we are remote and stay remote, then we don't have to test. It'd be very hard to do because nobody's here. But obviously, if we want to come back, the day that we decide to fully open our doors again, we would have to start testing that day for the 2 weeks to make sure that we're underneath the 7-day average. I want to just clarify that when we test, this test is for asymptomatic people only, so you're testing people here on campus, which you hope are healthy. This test is not to be used for symptomatic people. We did have some questions regarding if my child was at school and didn't feel well, can they go down to the nurse and get tested? The answer is no. This is not the test to do that. And obviously our nurses and actually the older people can perform their own test. So the juniors and seniors, under the supervision of the nurses and all our staff, they can swab their own noses and we'll run the test. So it's very convenient and very painless for this testing to occur. So the orange and red zone designations. This was updated last week. Before we were told that we had to close for 4 days and then to return, we had to meet some metrics as regarding testing. That's not the case. Schools in an orange zone, we need to test 20% of our school population over a month, not 2 weeks. So they actually gave us a month to test, and we can remain open. And schools in a red zone, we need to test 30% of our school population over a month. And obviously, during that time, we can remain open. So that's very, very good news from the governor. Certainly supports that he wants schools to remain open. The concern here is that if a random sampling generates 9 or more positive cases, or we have a positivity rate 3% or greater of a sample size. So if we test obviously 200 people and we have 6 positives, we must go 100% remote.
So that 9 number applies to large schools?
Technically it does, and it also depends on the sample size. So, I'm going by the percentage, the 3%. That's that and or. So if you actually had, it's tough because if you actually are testing 500 people, and you generate 9 positive cases.
2%.
Right. So.
Do you hear anything about districts that have multiple buildings? So a question was asked of me with us with 2 buildings and 2 separate populations, if they could be broke apart to where if the positivity rate, as you showed in the slide a few slides ago, was a lot worse with the older kids, it was lower in the elementary school. Could we break apart the populations and be...
Those are questions that we're looking at. School districts that are currently doing that see better results when they combine all the schools together to remain open. So we're not there yet. Those are questions that we're certainly asking because is it shutting down the whole district or shutting down the building that shows those percentages? Currently out in Monroe County, the schools are showing better results when they're combining and pooling all their buildings together. So that is something that we will certainly look into and research as if and when we get designated.
It seems like you're getting less positive results from the younger students, so the answer there would be test more younger students, unfortunately for the younger students, if you want to manipulate that.
Moving on.
Yeah.
John, how many people go regularly now between the 2 buildings?
It's just our related service providers and the admin team.
Yeah.
So OT, PT, speech.
Couple shared staff.
Will for the L, and then Julie, Connie.
Yeah, band, yeah. Couple
So
shared
if
staff.
it ever
So not many.
We reduced that a lot with the COVID.
If it ever became advantageous to us to split the buildings, as Matt suggests, we could cut that down even more? The cross-contamination?
Just regarding testing, we may have the testing at the end of the day, probably more so for employees, just for privacy reasons. And again, you're testing asymptomatic people. I would hate to test the teacher first period and have a positive come out, and now all of a sudden we're scrambling around to find coverage. So again, we're going to be looking at the Department of Health for some guidance on this, and then what the other school districts will be doing. Obviously, parents and guardians have the option to test, have a test administered by their family physician if they're not comfortable with the school doing it. However, that test must fall in the dates of when we are actually indicated. So I couldn't have it a family go out and test their child tomorrow and give me their result next week and say, hey, they were negative. It won't count. So only after we're ever indicated in the zone could a parent or guardian decide to take their child to their own family physician and be tested. They could also go to Well Now and be tested. We would just need those results. And again, if we cannot fulfill the required number of tests to be administered, we would need to transition to fully remote learning. But right now, like I said, we have enough for the first round of testing, and I am hopeful that if it's in that yellow designated zone, that we are certainly lower than our rolling averages that the community is seeing. And that's really the update I have for the new testing requirements.
So what keeps us from opening on January 11th? Can you talk through that? So you're going to blast out an email to your staff who's quarantined?
So, correct.
We talk to families. What won't we have for students in January?
So I am hopeful that after the winter break, that when we return here on January 4th, that our classrooms are filled with teachers. Obviously, the kids are going to be remote. I need to make sure that I have the staff back here. That is the key. And then we'll see during that week if our staff is here and healthy. If I'm still missing 15 to 20 staff members because over the break they're symptomatic, they're getting tests, they're positive, they have to quarantine, they're with other people, they have to quarantine, and I can't physically, staff the building to have supervision of the students, that's going to be an issue. So really, it's testing out that first week, making sure that our staff is healthy, and then we can bring the kids back on the 11th. With the notification to families that if we're going to open up our doors on the 11th, like Justin said, please don't send your kid to school if they have symptoms. Keep them at home, keep watching them, go get tested, but that's the plan. My concern is that as we are delaying that week, obviously that's 2 weeks from Christmas on that Friday, and we'll be back on that following Monday. There's also the concern of New Year's. What are families and kids going to be doing for New Year's? And it's really going to be a touch and go type of deal. Districts right now are just hanging on, so it's just a day-to-day thing. I didn't think sitting here we would have been doing what we did last Thursday and Friday. So my hope is that by shutting this place down for the 7 days and then having a winter break and then being remote for another 5, it kind of clears the air with everybody. Everybody's out of quarantine, everybody feels better, and we can staff the building at least with the teachers on the 4th and take count of who's still not here and who, what everybody's situation is.
John, now you're making me think back to what you just said a slide ago, or no, here, about whether it's good, no, it's this, it was that slide, whether it's better to test at the beginning or the end of the day. If the guidance is still, if you test positive, you have to have contact for 60 minutes in order to affect everyone around you. Wouldn't it be better to test at the beginning of the day as opposed to let someone connect with a whole bunch of people for 60 minutes throughout the day?
We're still looking at that. The concern is you're still going to have to contact trace. So if it's a Monday, probably, but if it's a Tuesday, it's not going to matter. Because as soon as that person is positive, you're going to have to go back.
48 hours, right?
Right. So, we're not sure, that's why the word may is there, we're not sure the best way to do this.
Well, on the first Monday back, test them all in the morning.
Yeah, right.
After that, all bets are off.
Right, exactly. And like I said, we are hopeful by teachers and families knowing 24 hours in advance that they will be tested or their child will be tested. The first question the nurses will ask is, are you feeling okay? You've been okay the last 4 or 5 years, you're all right? Obviously you're here on campus, but I'd be concerned if, someone had the sniffles or somebody woke up and had a headache. We don't want to take any chances. So, it's going to be very interesting. Like I said, we've been watching and hearing a lot what's been going on in Monroe County. This is the first time, I think, in this area. I don't know exactly what Batavia's plan is, but, you know, I don't know what the next 2 weeks may bring. We could get back here and be designated over the winter break as a zone. So all of this is still up in the air. But
And then just one more clarifying question. Before I came here tonight, I was told that part of our district is in a designated yellow zone. So one side of the road is yellow and the other side of the road is not yellow. But because the school district isn't in a yellow zone, we're not considered yellow zone.
so as far as where people live and the community goes, you could be designated as a yellow zone. So if you have a business or something that's under a yellow zone, you're under a yellow zone. As far as us as a district, we are not. So we don't have to abide by any of this testing if we were still here full boat. But for, you know, businesses and area shops and all of that, if you are designated in the yellow zone, you're a yellow zone. But as far as us abiding by any of the guidance that I just shared with you, it's this address. It has nothing to do with where our residents live. It's where we are.
Okay.
Funny story, there was a news article this morning because Lewiston Porter, part of it is in Lewiston, part of it's in Porter. Their campus is split right down the middle. And one area is designated a yellow zone, the other one is not. So they're trying to get guidance on what does that mean for the school district. But it's where the school district resides. So for Clarence, we could be designated in a yellow zone where the high school and middle school are not. It could be by building. That's how specific it could be. But it's exactly where the physical building lies in our address here.
So it sounds like, John, if we could have learned really one thing from last week, it's more probably that it's not necessarily the health of the kid, maybe some of the extended family or whatever. If you know a mom or a dad's been sick and you're waiting for a test for them to come back, but the kid's okay, keep the kid back, because it sounded like some of the things were that to where the kid was fine, but it was because they were in contact with somebody maybe in an extended family or whatever that might have started the snowball.
I cannot answer that, unfortunately.
It would be, and I understand you don't have the answers, but it'd be nice if before we came back, if we could send out a list of this is what we learned, you know, try to prevent it again type thing.
Yeah, we have, I have a meeting with Paul Pettit. The superintendents meet weekly. You know, everything is changing rapidly. If we had any sort of sense in that, you're absolutely right. You know, but again, it's impossible to figure out who's connected to who caught it from who, inside, outside, up, down.
Right. So
Yeah,
really, as a community, the only thing we can do is add extra caution to it, to where if you know so-and-so, you know,
Right.
get your kid out of here as soon as you can, you know they're okay.
Agreed. That's all I have.
Any other questions for John before we move on?
That was enough, John.
Thanks, John. New business. Be resolved that items 9.2 through 9.6 be approved via consent agenda. Motion.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Any discussion? So there's a donation of the baby grand piano we're thankful for, Mugs and More, $700 for the class of 2022, and then Mrs. Clark's donation from Staples.
Yes, thank you for the donations.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Communications? Not too much. Discussion roundtable? Any committee reports? Probably not. Personnel, be resolved that items 12.2 through 12.9 be approved via consent agenda. Good motion.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
And obviously, Tim Westcott is here.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Closing remarks. Jackie?
I just want to commend everybody for doing, I mean, all the work to get to this point. I'm so proud of our community, of our district, and the words that I'm hearing from everywhere, and I know you guys have all heard the same. We've all been commenting right along. It's pretty amazing that we've made it this far from, you know, and I don't want to, you know, degrade it from anybody, like what happened, can't control it, but very proud of how we are doing in other districts, other family members and friends. They don't have this response from their schools and a lot of it, so pretty proud of our district and all you guys hard work putting into it, so thank you, appreciate it.
Lauren?
I also want to say thank you to the administrators for all the grinding work you have to do and the leadership. And I want to say a big thank you to the teachers and the staff who come in every day, essentially, and work so hard in what is a petri dish of germ. I waver whether we should have our faculty work at the campus during this remote learning, or if we should send them home for a cleansing, because I'm sure you can monitor everything they do and all that. So that's one issue that I would like the administration to keep on thinking about, whether it's safe to have our faculty here. But I certainly do appreciate all the cleaners, all the bus drivers, all that, and especially the teachers for carrying on in a very difficult situation.
Counselor?
I think what administration, teachers, support staff has done is truly exhausting. You can hear the word COVID fatigue all day long, but it's so much more than that. It's draining, and at the end of the day, you still don't, I don't think, feel like you've really accomplished anything, but you have. I think there's a lot of districts that have just hoped the Department of Health is going to swoop in and do the job. Those Department of Health people don't care about hornets. You guys have proved night in and night out, day in and day out, that you do. From Lynn calling my house, Matt sending emails because there was just too many phone calls to make. It's appreciated. You haven't compromised the safety of my children to this point, but you still feel like, I think in your hearts, you've lost. You haven't. The 30% plus days of in-school instruction, so many more times more than other districts have experienced, and that's going to put our kids, our hornets, ahead. So from my standpoint, I'm very grateful from what you've done to today and what I know you're going to continue to do tomorrow. So for me and my family, thank you.
So we'll be looking forward to January 11th in my house. That's why I asked the question, what we got to do to get back. A lot of times I'll stop home from the farm about 8:30 when the girls leave, and yesterday at 8:30. We're looking forward to January 11th. So whatever we got to do, get them back. You know, it was working. You know, if anything, boy, it was working. Like what we were doing here. I mean, the kids were learning, and it was working. So, boy, I sure hope that January through June looks more similar to what that was and what this week and that first week of January will probably be. So thank you for everything you did to make that work. And boy, I hope we get back there. Pete?
Obviously everything that everybody else has already said, which to Justin's point, my son was quarantined over 2 weeks ago. I still haven't gotten a call from the Department of Health. So thanks for all the work. And it's been obvious as things are coming through. Every time on the weekend I get an email or whatever, I realize you guys are all here working when you don't really have to be. And it's definitely greatly appreciated. I also feel like we give the teachers and staff a lot of credit, but nobody's asked how Rob's doing. And I imagine tech support has gotten to be, and it could have, the Google thing could have happened on a worse Monday than the one Monday that we go, but I just want to make sure that, you know, tech support, are we good? Your job has had to been crazy this year, I imagine.
Yeah, it feels like it's a reminder of what it was like in the spring, suddenly as of Monday. The flood of calls and call test tickets and stuff.
You know what, Pete, though, I do want to say that the admin team, we do kind of make fun of Rob because we sense that he does have all the power, and sometimes we think when something like that goes down, he's just sitting in his office, just pulling plugs and laughing and making our lives even more miserable. But
I think on Monday morning, someone at Google moved the foosball table too close to the electrical, and I pulled it. So.
yeah, so, but no, Rob's a rock star, and I can't imagine where we'd be without him. So, but we do make fun of you, Rob.
But thanks to you too, Rob, because obviously this year has probably been way crazier than you ever signed up for as well.
Yeah, thank you.
And again, I reiterate, I'm very appreciative for everything that's been done here, staff, lunch personnel, buildings and grounds, bus drivers, administration. It's been a long road. We got a long way to go. It's very stressful and a lot of anxiety out there too. And very appreciative because we know nobody's been here before. So just thank you, and I hope during the holidays and Christmas everybody has some time to have some relaxation.
Thanks, Dan.
Oh, I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody too. Merry Christmas.
That's coming up, right? That's,
Be it resolved that the regular meeting of the Board of Education be adjourned at 7:38. Can we get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passed.